Hello, my name is Rebal Alkhatib, and today I will be discussing addiction. 40 million Americans aged 12 and older, or more than 1 in 7 people, abuse or are addicted to nicotine, alcohol, or other drugs. This is more than the number of Americans with heart conditions, 27 million, diabetes, 26 million, or cancer, 19 million. I got this information from the centeronaddiction.org. It underlines just how many people are affected daily in the United States alone from a form of addiction. These are shocking figures to me. I consider myself a little expert because my cousin suffered from addiction and has been suffering with it the past year. Addiction comes in many forms and ways. Recently on the news, social media, we've been hearing about drooling amongst teens and the opiate crisis in the United States. Today, I'll be focusing on addiction. I will go over how Big Pharma played a large role and the doctors that everyone trusted played, how addiction mentally and physically changed the user. I'll also be going over how addiction affects the lives of the user's family and friends. Addiction is a disease that does not discriminate, it comes from many forms, and has major effects. Big pharmaceutical companies and government lobbyists play a major role in drug use, drug abuse, and drug-related deaths. Big Pharma persuades government to make certain deals, certain drugs legal and illegal. Not a lot of drugs were legal and super accessible in the United States not even 100 years ago. Drugs like PCP, ketamine, and marijuana were not illegal and easily acceptable. It wasn't until the Controlled Substance Act of 1970 that there was legitimate enforcement of these drugs. Doctors prescribe children hard drugs and parents don't bat an eye. Children as young as 6 years old are being prescribed Adderall for their ADHD. Adderall has dextromethorphan in it, which is an amphetamine, which, if you guessed it, sounds like amphetamine. They're very similar in structure. Drugs. Doctors also prescribe Doctors also prescribe drugs and opiates to patients, and over a long period of time, if the patient stops taking the drugs and the prescription ends, then they go to the streets and start looking for these opiates, like heroin and fentanyl. Addiction comes in many shapes and forms. Again, many addictions are drugs, some aren't even drugs. So let's start with the drugs. Drugs impair your mind and body. Drugs like tobacco and alcohol are legal and can be bought at almost any convenience store. You're now seeing on the news the new drooling epidemic against teens. Now there's always been the stigma of drinking in underage teens. These drugs change the chemicals in the user's brain and give the user a reward effect. Drugs like coke and meth and opiates can rewire the brain and body to think the addict needs the drug to survive. Even nicotine can rewire your brain after several uses to think you need nicotine. Some addictions have physical and mental effects. Some of the physical effects would be weight loss, cartilage damage, um, lung problems, carcinogens in the lungs. Others are mental, or so I thought. For example, my cousin, who got addicted to opiates over the past year, would always say that his bones hurt and he couldn't survive a day without an opiate. I didn't believe him, I always thought it was a mental thing, but drugs like heroin and fentanyl can feel like you were dying, feel like they're literally killing you if you do not take the drug. Some effects are muscle spasms, nausea, fever, sweating, vomiting, and diarrhea, and that is just from simply stopping taking those drugs. Some addictions are uncommon though. Have you ever watched My Strange Addiction on TLC? So the addictions presented in that show are people eating glass, bathing in bleach, eating mattresses. These addictions both mentally and physically damage the user. Simply eating glass is not good for your intestinal tract, so the same thing goes for eating mattresses and, of course, showering and bathing in bleach. Those I'll be using the testimony of my first cousin. He has struggled with opiate addiction for over a year through high school. I asked him to give an inside look of what addiction can be like. He was a 4.0 he was a 4.0 GPA high school student as well as a lacrosse stud. After high school, he dropped out of college so he can continue his drug addiction. Shortly after he quit his job, he later OD'd. Tragic. My cousin went through one hell of a year. He even went to jail. After he got out, he continued his bad habits. My cousin is a prime example of what addiction can lead to. The loved ones of users are also affected by the user's choice of addiction. A sibling or significant other usually does not see the signs of an addict until it's too late. My cousin that I mentioned earlier always had family worrying and crying about him. There would be calls made to check if he was in jail or if he was at the local hospital. 130 people die a day from opiate drug misuse. I got this from the CDC, and I can guarantee you some of those people had family, and those families will be missed. This is another way families and lives of people are affected by the user. Some families can also be affected if they're the ones paying for their loved one's addiction or paying for their loved one's rehabilitation costs, their court fees if they go to jail, or some other legal problems. In conclusion, addiction is a very life-changing ordeal. It affects families, has many physical and mental effects to the person, and lastly, it's a very accepted habit. Not many people experience addiction or know what it can do to yourself and others. I'm thankful I could inform all of you on how serious and surreal addiction can be.